Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the LRN Podcast Series. In the light of the recent floods that have devastated almost 80% of Pakistan, it was long overdue that we have a conversation about the climate crisis of Pakistan. For having that conversation, we have in the studio with us today climate activist Miss Ameera Adil. Hello, Ameera.
Hi, nice to be here.
Likewise. अब चूंकि मैं भूल गया हूँ आपको इंट्रोड्यूस करना, so can you tell us what you do apart from being a climate activist? In fact, can you tell us what a climate activist does?
Right, so I've been a climate activist for 7 years and each one of those years कुछ different ही था. तो शुरू में I used to be an environmental activist, which meant that I was very worried about how we were affecting the environment through littering and waste and pollution and stuff like that. And then as much as I learned, तो मुझे पता चला कि this is happening at a much global scale. Like it's much bigger than one person or one individual's action. And that's how I became a climate change activist. So basically what that means is that I am against climate change, as we all are, but I'm also trying to learn about it and trying to learn about the solutions of climate change and sort of trying to fix it however I can.
Okay. Ameera, when we hear the word climate activist, a lot of us think कि अच्छा वो marches करते होंगे climate change के बारे में, raise their voices, make a lot of noise. Is that a large part of what you do, or can you just walk us through the kind of work that you've done in the last 6 or 7 years?
Right. So the reason वो marches होती हैं, it's because climate activism is very much political activism, and that is why, that's because climate change is a political issue. Not just in the sense that political parties के हिसाब से, it's because the industries that we have, the big polluters that we have, they're all going to be controlled only through policies. And until and unless we change those policies, we're not going to see real change happen. And that is why it's called political activism, and that is why we march.
Okay, good. Can you tell us a bit about what you do professionally? What your organization does, where else have you worked, and how have you played your part in the last few years as a climate activist, not just as an activist, but as a professional?
Right. So there weren't a lot of opportunities, or at least I wasn't aware of the job opportunities for me when I graduated with my environmental engineering degree. So I pretty much worked anywhere that I could find work, and I've been working as a climate activist for free. Well, climate activism is free work. So I've been working for free for many years. Uske baad, I found a job at an INGO called Save the Children. That's where I worked as an environmental assistant. Okay. From there on in, I had consultancies, sort of training sessions that I delivered. And now I'm working at NUST at the Office of Sustainability.
Okay, great. हम ना इसके बाद अब सीधा पाकिस्तान की तरफ आएंगे, because now we have gained an insight about your work. Can you please tell us कि जो हमने recently floods देखे हैं, how much of that can be attributed to the climate crisis of Pakistan, and can you just walk us through the science of the climate crisis that Pakistan faces right now?
So the science of climate change is very simple. Greenhouse gases होती हैं, those are gases that absorb heat. The more of them that we emit into our atmosphere, the more warming that will have. And जब आपका earth warm up हो रहा होता है, तो आपके earth के systems, they're affected by it. So evaporation ज़्यादा होगी, which means बारिशें ज़्यादा होंगी, glaciers melt होंगे, floods आएंगे, that sort of thing. So the science is very simple. And the reason that Pakistan is affected more is because of a number of reasons. See, we don't have the right infrastructure, we have bad governance, and then we're geographically situated at the foothill of the third pole, which is the biggest host of glaciers that we have apart from the North and South Pole. So it's inevitable for us to face some climate change impacts. But as for the floods, a small portion of the floods can be attributed to climate change, but otherwise it's mostly due to our infrastructure and bad governance and lack of preparedness.
You say lack of preparedness. How can one be more prepared about something that's so inherently natural?
Yeah, so floods, yes, they are natural, but when you block the river's pathways and then the river explodes or takes a breath, as a flood is, we cannot blame the river for, expanding. But since this is not the first time this has happened, जब एक दफ़ा होती है तो गलती होती है, जब दूसरी दफ़ा होती है तो हमारी अपनी गलती, मतलब अपना मसला होता है. After the 2010 floods, there were a lot of assessments done. There were a lot of reports made on how to move forward, a flood adaptation strategy, if you will. Everything, the whole thing happened. But still, people did not know where to go during evacuation. People did not know how to deal with the entire situation. It was a mess all around. We still have infrastructure that's built on riverbeds that was washed away. जैसे कि वो जो hotels हमने देखे हैं that were washed away. Our rivers, जो उस पे bridges बने हुए थे, they washed away. So why is this happening? These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves, and our government and the people responsible for building these structures there in the first place.
So the governance side of this argument is that chunke is the amount of rain that happened was unprecedented, was way more than they were expecting. Yeah, they had built the infrastructure for, let's say, back in 2010 or 2015. So that is why the calamity happened as it did in front of us. What is your take on that?
So see, when you're building an infrastructure like a dam per se, okay, so you have to take into account freak weather events as well, like the extreme possibilities that can happen, and uske lihaz se aapne banana hota hai. Now, we can say that if 2010 se 10 guna zyada bada flood aata na, so that's like an extreme event that you could not be prepared for. But this is like at the scale of 2010 well, floods, like slightly higher than that.
Okay.
So if it happened like literally 12 years ago, why did you not take into account that this could happen again?
Okay, true. You talk about dams. We saw, I'm pretty sure you would have seen this footage of Tarbela Dam's spillways and how they sort of exploded in terms of the amount of water that was going through them. And we know that Tarbela is one of the bigger dams in Pakistan. There's an argument out there that states that building of dams actually is not essentially the solution for flooding, let's say, not just the climate crisis. What do you say about that?
So the people who are in support of dams talk about two things. One, irrigation and storage, and two, energy. So if we're talking about storage and irrigation, Pakistan has a river running through the middle of the country, right? It's going through the length of the country, River Indus. So जब वो पानी आपका mountain से आता है, that's fresh water, and the river is not lined from beneath, right? So the water absorbs itself in the ground. Under the River Indus, we have a 500 million acre feet storage of water, groundwater. ठीक है? हमारी जो total requirement है, it's like of industries plus the human use, domestic use, it's like under 15 million acre feet. Okay. And for our irrigation system, it's under 100 million acre feet.
Okay.
So we have an extra, say, 350 million acre feet. So there's your storage solution that you can utilize. Number two, for energy. Now I'm quoting Dr. Hassan Abbas over here because I was at an event of his and I learned this recently. For energy, when Tarbela Dam was built, so us waqt 60s or 70s mein, this was one of the newer solutions. This was one of the most effective solutions, hydroelectric power. Now we've seen since 2017, solar energy has been the cheapest source of energy in the world. And it's only getting cheaper. So is it feasible to spend billions of dollars on building a dam whose energy will be available 10 years from now when you could provide solar energy right now? Yeah. So if the same amount of money was spent somewhere else, like for example, the Neelam Jhelum Dam. So it was built in around $6 billion. Right? And it provides 440 megawatts of electricity around.
Yeah.
So if you calculate that per watt, that's around 6,000 rupees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this is all new to me as well because I'm learning about the flood situation. I'm learning a lot of new things. But yeah, so dams might not be the solution for us. And we might need to look ahead of dams. And we are, because with the CPEC, you have solar farms, you have wind energy. There's a lot of options, right? And we have biomass in Pakistan. There's so many options for us to look into. And Tarbela Dam was actually, it accounted for like a quarter of Pakistan's debt for that decade.
Yeah.
And, possibly this new dam, the Bhasha Dam, might account for even more. So we need to look at like our economic perspective as well. If we're willing to invest a little more in our research and trust our researchers a little more, maybe we could find solutions that are better than anywhere else that are found in the world. So
It's very interesting that you raise this point because हमने जितना भी discourse सुना है about water storage and water dissemination, it's always been about dams. It's and I think it's high time we realize that they're not the only solution. In that very breath, you talked about the storage opportunity in the Indus River. How can like that be integrated into the system? Can you please just talk a little bit about the science of that? About किस तरह होगा वो?
Right. So our current irrigation system, I think around 70% of it uses groundwater.
Okay.
Right. And if you live in Islamabad, most likely you use groundwater. So I don't know about cities aside from Islamabad, but there's a good chance that a lot of people in Pakistan are using groundwater. And we are doing nothing to replenish our groundwater. So if this is a resource that is, easy for us to use, and already a lot of people are using it, why aren't we investing more in, facilitating that resource instead of like, sticking to the past and trying to, suck on that solution that we know exists. So that is one thing that could be done.
What is the past solution? I'm sorry. I'm
storage, dams, right? Having reservoirs and, having pipes of water run through. So a decentralized solution might actually be good for Pakistan, given that our transmission system is so bad.
What decentralized solution? What do you mean by decentralized solution?
So if you're extracting groundwater, every house has its own extraction point, right? So every house is reliant on the groundwater that's existing below the surface on their own terms. Much like if you have solar installed on your roof, you're pretty much reliant on yourself. So that is what I mean by decentralized. There's no central place where the water is stored and you're being given water through pipes, through a pipe system. You're doing it yourself, all by yourself. So that could be very effective for especially rural areas where transmission lines don't reach at all. So yeah.
लेकिन उसके ऊपर फिर again being the devil's advocate, एक और counter argument ये है, especially in urban areas, and we've seen this happen, is that the water table is getting lower and lower in cities like let's say Rawalpindi, Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi essentially. Then how do we counter that problem? Because then the water resources under the ground is going to replenish much more than, let's say, dam water.
So there's a very good technique for that. It's called rainwater harvesting.
Okay.
And I did crunch the numbers for my house, but I forgot. But you can, from just like 1 hour of rain, you can store like several days of water for yourself. Now you don't just need to store it. You maybe don't have like storage facilities, so you can like direct that water underground to your aquifers. Though it purifies itself naturally through the rocks, the rock bed and everything, and then you have it replenished in your aquifer. And if every house starts to do that, if that's like a policy made in Islamabad or Rawalpindi, we could like fix our groundwater table problem.
Amazing. I didn't know that about that at all. लेकिन इस तरह का I think forecasting के मामले में, flood forecasting के मामले में, we still have solutions in the cities like in Islamabad. There's a Lai Nala flood forecasting system. I'm not sure what it does, but apparently it has saved urban flooding in these cities for the last few years. Of course, that can be attributed to the geographical location of these cities. But my point here is that how are we gonna transfer this R&D, this technology to the rural areas? Because again, at the end of the day, they are the most vulnerable when it comes to the climate crisis, to flooding, to anything essentially.
So I think that the most effective thing that we can do is community engagement at this point. So what I mean by that is identifying flood zones, having like, red zone, yellow zone, blue zone, wherever, what's safe, what's not safe, and letting people know where they're living. So Dr. Hassan Abbas and his team did that for E11, and they alerted the homes in E11 of which houses were in danger of flooding and which houses' basements could not be occupied. And if we do that for like rural areas, it would be like a one-time thing essentially, because we can map out where the floods happen through GIS and through local authorities. So it wouldn't be like, it would be very effective in minimizing losses, especially with human lives.
Great. Achha, for somebody who doesn't understand, what is GIS?
Geographical Information System is basically using satellite imagery to like sort of map out what's happening on ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. अच्छा, हमने देखा है कि फ्लड्स से पाकिस्तान में इतना डिस्ट्रक्शन हुआ है, एंड अगेन मतलब a lot of that can be attributed to climate change. Since you've worked with climate change so much, can you tell us a bit more about the sort of dangers that Pakistan is vulnerable to, aside from flooding, that are caused by climate change?
Pakistan is pretty much in danger to everything. चाहे गर्मी हो, चाहे सर्दी हो, चाहे spring हो, चाहे autumn हो, monsoon हो, we're threatened by climate change. So a few other things that are of note are sea level rise. आपकी sea level rise, not in the sense that कि आपकी city कोई डूब जाएगी, because that's not going to happen for a long time, but आपकी salination increase हो जाएगी. So basically, like if Karachi के इर्द कोई farm or something and it's near the coast, not on the coast but near the coast, there's a likelihood of seawater intrusion into that place, and then that place is inhabitable for crops. So आपके agricultural losses से बहुत होते हैं. Then you have Govt, which are glacier lake outburst floods, and we're seeing more and more of that, like insane level of number of Govts happening in the northern areas, and our glaciers are melting at an alarming pace right now, and all the villages that exist around these glaciers are at risk of being drowned. Like Attabad Lake was actually a village, right? And we see it as a tourist attraction, but it's actually a product of climate change. It's a prime example. So yeah, stuff like that. And then you also have heat waves and droughts. Just saal flood nahi hoga, saal drought aa jayegi. Like we're seeing right now कि Europe में अभी drought है, while we have like extreme flooding. So these are the sort of extremities that we're going to be seeing more of. Climate change isn't like a singular event that's going to happen. It's just going to make existing problems worse for us.
Okay. It's very interesting that you talked about Attabad, because a lot of times when we see these tourist attractions, we only see the beauty of them, essentially, and what we don't take into account is that what calamity they are. On that note, I want to confirm this from you, that a lot of the flash floods that happen in the KP were due to this glacier problem. Is that true?
I can't say. I haven't studied it directly, so I can't say. But mostly what I know is that it was the monsoon rains. Because glaciers do melt in July and August. So they contribute to the force of the river. But the monsoon rains also had a great part to play in this issue.
Ameera, we've talked about the problems in a little bit of detail. Now I want to move this discussion forward. और मैं चाह रहा हूँ कि हम बात करें solutions के हवाले से. What do you think that what do you think is something that the Pakistan government can do? We talked about how it is a governance crisis, the flooding and heat waves and droughts and all that. So आपके ख्याल में ऐसा क्या है जो हुकूमत पाकिस्तान कर सकती है, या उसको एटलीस्ट कोई एक्शन पॉइंट्स जो इमीडिएटली लेने चाहिए to fight this crisis that is going to come?
I think अगर दो चीज़ें फिक्स हो जाए ना गवर्नेंस के हिसाब से, तो we'd be in a much better position. Number one, accountability. Because आपकी even जो NGOs वगैरह होती हैं या different organizations जो projects करती हैं, वो लोग सारा सेटअप बना के रनिंग उसमें डाल के ना एक social protection system या जो भी वो करते हैं करके गवर्नमेंट को देते हैं. And then when they come back after like 2 or 3 years, it's not there anymore.
Where does it go?
Exactly, where does it go? So the accountability within the government is very important, because we can't keep track of like an organization cannot run a project for 30-40 years.
True.
Yeah, so एक accountability. दूसरी बात ये है कि long term sustainable solutions. एक गवर्नमेंट आती है 5 साल के लिए काम चलाती है, फिर चली जाती है. दूसरी गवर्नमेंट आती है, सेम काम करती है. So if we have sustainability within our actions, like long-term plans that we implement regardless of कि कौन सी party हमारी government में है, that is the thing we need for climate change. Because climate change is not just about the environment, it's not just about weather, it's your entire system, your infrastructure, your social protection, your education, your health system, everything comes under it. And हमने ministry, now this is a controversial opinion that I have, but I'm not afraid to share. Ministry of Climate Change हमने बनाई हुई है. उसकी jurisdiction क्या है? एक तो it's only in Islamabad, federal area. But उसके अलावा उसकी jurisdiction क्या है? Like, can it control what policies the Energy Petroleum Division makes? Can it control the policies of the Health Ministry? Can it control any other ministry or influence any other ministry? और जब ये नहीं कर सकती काम, तो अगर आपने सपोज कार्बन इमिशंस कम करने, वेयर आर योर कार्बन इमिशंस कमिंग फ्रॉम एग्रीकल्चर और पेट्रोलियम से. मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज कुछ इन मिनिस्ट्रीज़ को कह सकती है कि आप ये वाली चीज़ ना करें या आप ये करें, आप वो करें. नहीं कह सकती. सो व्हाई डू वी हैव अ मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज? What is its purpose? So these are the sort of questions that lead me to believe that the Pakistani government might have like both parties. I'm not just talking about one party, all the parties. No, one thing I really like about Pakistan is that we don't have the stupid debates जो अमेरिका वगैरह में होती हैं कि climate change exist करता है कि नहीं करता. It's a reality for us. There's no deniability and people want to take action.
I think there is no deniability because we've seen first-hand impacts. Yes,
exactly. You can't deny it.
Yeah.
खैर इम्पैक्ट्स तो वो भी देख रहे हैं, लेकिन बट नहीं, देर इज़ अवेयरनेस ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज इन पाकिस्तान, वेरी वाइड स्प्रेड अवेयरनेस. बट जब बात आती है कुछ करने की कि क्या करना चाहिए, तो उसमें एक तो पैसे की डिबेट आ जाती है कि गवर्नमेंट के पास पैसा नहीं है टू स्पेयर ऑन दिस. ठीक है, हमारे पास डेवलपमेंट के लिए इन जनरल पैसा नहीं है, बट देन लेट द पीपल डू समथिंग ना, कि जो लोग ऑलरेडी कुछ कर रहे हैं उसको तो आप आगे चला दें ना, उन सिस्टम्स को तो आगे चला दें. सो दैट इज़ समथिंग दैट द गवर्नमेंट कैन वर्क ऑन. लाइक लिटरली अकाउंटेबिलिटी इज़ लाइक बेस लेवल थिंग फॉर एवरीथिंग, नॉट जस्ट क्लाइमेट चेंज.
It's very interesting that you raised this point about petroleum and energy ministry वगैरह, और that leads me to a whole different tangent. Like, and I think it's very important we address this as well. In the past few years, whenever Pakistan has signed these coal power project deals या किसी भी किस्म की पाकिस्तान ने जो नॉन ग्रीन एनर्जी नीड्स मीट करने के लिए अपने प्रोजेक्ट्स लगाए हैं या उस तरह की डेवलपमेंट की है, तो whenever there has been a green argument regarding that कि आप ये कर रहे हैं, ये बुरा है पाकिस्तान के लिए, तो the argument that is thrown and which is very sane, by the way, is that Pakistan only produces 0.49% of the world's carbon dioxide. Pakistan is, I think, after the 30th number in the global producers, in the global CO2 emitters. So no matter what Pakistan does, why does the onus of responsibility, climate responsibility, lie with Pakistan and Pakistan alone? And of course, Pakistan is facing problems. लेकिन उनका argument ये है कि even if they don't do that, we're still going to face problems. So we'd rather be resilient, or we don't, or we just like die without the energy. What is your take on that?
So there's two things when it comes to climate solutions, climate action. Ek mitigation and ek adaptation. Mitigation is basically about lowering your carbon emissions and eventually taking it to zero. Adaptation is about the existing impacts that we're facing right now and how to deal with those impacts. So जब पाकिस्तान की बात आती है, we're not the contributors to climate change in the real sense, essence. ठीक है, मतलब हम ठीक है करते हैं, कुछ emissions हैं, but that doesn't mean कि we're one of the biggest contributors. And the climate change that we're an industrializing country now. So the climate change that we're facing now is largely the responsibility of developed, global north nations. So आपकी हर साल एक conference of parties होती है. So it's COP.
COP26, last year.
Exactly. So Pakistan can essentially fight for its rights at forums like that. It can force the global north to see what's happening over here and to give us funding or invest in renewable energy. जैसे NUST में इतना काम हो रहा है renewable energy पे, but we lack investments because people don't trust us with like Pakistanis कि हमारा माल खराब है. So basically we need the global north to take responsibility and invest in Pakistan, in our infrastructure, in our research, in our education, to strengthen our systems so that we can fight climate change. And जहाँ तक पाकिस्तान की government की responsibility आती है, it's, I think mitigation ठीक है is important in terms of like saying कि आपकी जो बड़ी fossil fuel companies हैं या Nestle या PepsiCo और इस तरह की जो companies हैं, आप उन पे policies लगाओ, उनकी emissions कम करवाओ, उनके जो है pollution कम करवाओ, basically government का जहाँ role आता है. But that's not the only thing that you should be focusing on. We're being affected right now. So where is your adaptation plan? Yeah. Where are your strategies to deal with the existing impacts जो कि हर सूरत में होने हैं. चाहे आप कर लो emissions अपनी zero, चाहे आप ना करो. We're still going to be like one of the biggest affected countries, most affected countries by climate change. So what are we doing about adaptation? Nobody knows anything.
I also raise this point because एक और बहुत बड़ा debate है, which is essentially anti-climate changers, वो यही है कि even if it is real, and thank God पाकिस्तान में लोग इस तरह नहीं कहते कि even if it is real, लेकिन even if it is real, there's nothing you can do about it. You'd rather adapt and move on, या फिर आप mitigation नहीं कर सकते. Is that true for Pakistan?
No, it's not true. And this is actually a narrative that's pushed by fossil fuel companies.
Yeah.
And fossil fuel companies are actually behind the term carbon footprint as well, because they wanted to introduce an individual responsibility aspect to a thing that they were doing. मतलब कि हमसे responsibility हट के individuals पे आ जाए कि ठीक है हम तो produce कर रहे हैं आप use क्यों कर रहे हो. Yeah, so these are tactics that have been employed by the fossil fuel companies. एक तो greenwashing करते हैं वो, दूसरा ये inaction promote करते हैं, basically climate doomism कहते हैं इसको कि you make them so hopeless कि अब तो कुछ हो ही नहीं सकता तो फ़ायदा क्या है करने का, let us like do whatever we want. So it's just propaganda.
True. इसी बात से हम इस पॉइंट पे आते हैं कि हमने बात कर ली कि हुकूमतें क्या कर सकती हैं. आपके ख्याल में लोग क्या कर सकते हैं? Because we have seen that as people, and this is something that has been reiterated by the recent floods, that we as people of Pakistan at least cannot really rely on the governments. So what is something that the people of Pakistan can do to solve the climate crisis, apart from, let's say, the propaganda that you mentioned? What can they really do?
So I work with youth advocacy. मतलब मेरा main ही goal youth advocacy है. And I work with a lot of brilliant young people who are dedicated to fighting the climate crisis and वैसे भी social activism में interested हैं. And the reason that I want to focus on the youth is because I see them wanting to go to tree plantations and clean up drives and just sort of they want to do anything that they can to help Pakistan. And हो नहीं रहा होता कुछ आगे से तो they get hopeless and कि मतलब what do we do, हम तो सब कुछ कर रहे हैं अपनी तरफ से. And that led me to climate change education and communication. Until and unless we know what the problem is in our context, we're not going to know what the solutions are. And let me tell you this, nobody in Pakistan is being taught what our problem is. Climate change का जो content आपके पास, आप Google करो climate change and you want to learn about climate change, what is the content that you're going to get? US based, UK based, Europe based, it's the global north. और उनका क्या agenda है? To lower their carbon emissions because they're the producers. We're the effectees. So where's our content on climate change? Who's teaching these kids about climate change in Pakistan? So that is actually what I'm doing with my initiative Climate as well. I'm developing content that is specifically for Pakistan, contextualized, how is it affecting us and what we can do about it. But unfortunately, when you talk about individual solutions and individual action, it's not that fun, right? Tree plantations are fun to go to. Cleanup drives are like, okay, you're doing a group activity together. But what's really going to help is to empower these kids with information, arm them with knowledge. So one thing that I like to do for that are like policy simulations, trainings, workshops, stuff like that. Awareness sessions, I like awareness sessions, but again, the content that you're getting off of the internet is global north oriented, and then that content is being propagated. So again, we need to develop our own content, and for that we need to understand what climate change is in terms of Pakistan. And so that's sort of the solution. Learn about climate change and form your own opinions about it.
I think that is absolutely necessary. Great work that you're doing. एक और इसमें पॉइंट है वो ये है कि इकोनॉमिक feasibility क्या है to go green for essentially every Pakistani, because हम as Pakistanis we are already an economic downtrodden country. We have मतलब below poverty line हमारी 50% के करीब population है. What is their incentive to, let's say, move from a 2-stroke motorbike to not exactly an electric motorbike, but something that's greener for the environment?
Why would you move towards an electric motorbike? Where are your charging stations? आप road पे कहीं फंस जाते हो, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. So that is my question. What is the incentive? Where is the incentive, and how do we produce that for the poor people, or for the economically downtrodden, to essentially be pro-environment instead of like being pro-life?
Yeah, but you don't need to implement, again, the thing that I talked about is these are global north solutions. Having an electric vehicle, exactly. I'm so rich, I can afford an electrical vehicle. Yeah, Tesla, no big deal. turning off the lights after you leave the room. भाई हमारे पास बिजली नहीं होती, ठीक है. Not use gas. D12 में आधे D12 में gas नहीं है, E11 में gas होती ही नहीं है. So like all
and
of
these are still better off areas. एक ऐसे areas हैं जहाँ पे सिरे से ही नहीं है.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying when I'm talking about developing our own content. के we don't need to be asking these people to do anything to change their lifestyle because we don't have those lifestyle options available. Now, from personal experience, so agriculture is the second biggest source of carbon emissions in the world. We're an agricultural country. We have a lot of cattle that unfortunately died in this flood disaster. But so cattle produces methane, which is much more potent than carbon dioxide. To zyada greenhouse gases, zyada global warming hoti hai. So in lieu of that, I decided to go vegan while I was living in hostel in NUST. And I got terribly sick because all I could eat was naan. And that's it.
Wow.
So I literally stopped eating because I couldn't find vegan options. And then I lived in London for a bit, and udhar itni zyada vegan options thi कि I could never even feel the absence of meat and chicken. So when the options aren't available for you to switch your lifestyle, why are you asking people to like
switch their lifestyle?
Exactly. ठीक है, like या तो फिर if you're rich enough to afford everything, no, that's a different story. But you cannot, and of course, also rural people, especially like most of our population, doesn't have access to that much meat and chicken in the first place. Like they have a mostly plant-based diet, and that's what we're aiming for with climate change. Like why go beyond, why go towards tofu, why go towards like oat milk and stuff that's not available. Like dal chawal khao dal chawal. Like,
I think that's very important, contextualizing Pakistan's place in this climate crisis, क्योंकि again, as you said, global west is debate ko they've sort of hogged the public opinion. We're going to move towards the end of our discussion, and I'm gonna ask you about how hopeful are you for Pakistan in terms of climate resilience? आपके ख्याल में क्या हम कर सकते हैं? Because जिस तरह से हम देख रहे हैं, it's getting exponentially worse year by year in terms of heat waves, floods, you name it. तो क्या कितनी hopeful हैं आप as somebody who's worked with so much stake involved in this industry particularly?
Something's got to break. Something's going to break soon. I don't know if it's going to be a global revolution. I don't know if it's going to be a technological revolution. Something's got to give. And without that, nothing's going to happen. And abhi global north mein to 2017 I guess the heat is building up with Greta Thunberg and other youth activists, and abhi the activism is getting more and more extreme, and it's going to keep on getting extreme, and then we're going to have like a holistic view of activism, that as in there are going to be like revolutions across the world that we're going to see, because abhi we don't know what the after effects of this flood are going to be. But I have a good guess that a lot of the unfortunate refugees are not going to be catered for. And that's going to create more social problems, and that's going to create social unrest. So there's this term called climate security that we need to look into now, because climate change is very much a security issue now as well for us. Human security bhi and वैसे भी national security bhi threatens that. I can't say I'm hopeful, but I know that something's going to change very soon, because things cannot go on like this for very long.
Absolutely. I think it's great that you talked about climate security and all, and the after effects that we're going to face after this flood, क्योंकि हमारा असल प्रॉब्लम वही है रीडेवलपमेंट का और मिटिगेशन का, बिकॉज प्रिपेयर्डनेस तो बहुत मुश्किल है, लेकिन ये स्टेप्स हम कभी भी नहीं ले पाते, एंड लाइक इट सॉर्ट ऑफ फेड्स आउट ऑफ द पब्लिक डिबेट व्हेन एक दफ़ा फ्लड्स हो गए, रिलीफ वर्क हो गया, और उसके बाद बात निकल जाती है, अगले मानसून तक अगली बार दोबारा बात होती है. ऑन दैट नोट, आई वांट यू टू गिव वन फाइनल मैसेज to the youth who's watching, to the people who are watching, as to what they can do to play their part.
So if you're watching this and there's a good chance that you donated for the flood victims right now, for disaster relief right now, and that's great. But there are two steps to every disaster. There's the immediate relief, and then there's the adaptation strategy, the how to move forward part. And that is something that not a lot of people are going to be looking at, because we have problem upon problem in Pakistan, and it's very easy to forget our problems that happened before. So if you're watching this, I want you to think about what happens next. What happens next for these refugees? What happens next for these 33 plus million people who are affected by the floods right now, the people who died, the people who lost their entire livelihoods, their houses, everything. Because these people are going to be on our streets. They're our neighbors, they're our fellow countrymen. And it's great that we're donating, but we need a solid plan to deal with this. Donations alone aren't going to be helpful. We need to know where to spend the money and how to spend it.
Amazing. Ameera, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Thank you so much for making your presence known. And we, as people of Pakistan, thank you for all the work that you are doing in this space. And we hope that you get to achieve more and more, not just for yourself, but for the people of Pakistan, for the climate as well. With that, we're going to end the show. I hope you liked today's discussion. If you have any questions, you can write them in the comments. Thank you so much, and we'll meet you in the next podcast.